on October 25 of the year 2007, and we're in our little mini studio here on 36th Street, and we've just watched the program with Paula and Gloria when she was in California, and she's now in this studio, and we're racing the clock. We've got to do some programming at MNN today, but we're here talking with her, and we're going to pick up from what we were talking about then, and we're recording it. We were going to try and put some programming out to the stream, but we haven't been able to get that together yet. But Paula, welcome very, very much to Conversations, and see if we can get her to come up to the switcher. There we go. Here's Paula, and Paula, say hello to the audience and so forth.
Hello, everybody at MNN and eventually out on YouTube. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here. I think that this is an accomplishment of many lifetimes.
Could we be?
And
Yeah.
as you say, Harold, we have to think 1 year out.
Well, as I said,
we had problems with the stream.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly why, but I feel if each of us do the best we can with the resources that we have, eventually we'll all make the connection.
Yeah,
that's
right.
kind of my intuition.
Well, this is the day. This is, in a certain sense, a memorable day because you've been working right out on the leading edge of pushing the envelope, as they say, by getting in touch with John Kowalski, who I had done a program with a week or so ago.
Yeah, wonderful
John,
program, Harold.
Well, it was
that
interesting.
program.
John understands the possibilities of the emerging technological capabilities of getting communication going out and so forth. And you had taken advantage of his knowledge, and you two had worked together and put together a situation for a month or so. Maybe it's worth talking about, where you have been, after your program, further down the rabbit hole, rabbitholecentral.tv, that airs on MNN 11:30 to noon, you pick up a stream and you can have a connection going out to the world. And maybe it's worthwhile talking about that. Maybe talk about Down the Rabbit Hole, and then talk about the fact that you've been streaming, I guess, for about a month or so, and pushing that envelope, because that's one of the aspects of communications that is emerging that is important, particularly so, if I may, to the public access community, which are not big institutionally connected people so much, but are individuals. But talk a little bit about, maybe a little bit of yourself and about the Rabbit Hole Central.
Well, I've had the honor to be a guest on Harold's show many times, and I've also had the honor to, you know, kind of investigate other producers' work. And what fascinates me is what keeps people going to follow an inspiration beyond our reward-punishment system. That, in other words, from what keeps people inspired to produce shows when they're not being paid for it. And it seems this is a model that's worth understanding, because so often, so many of the problems that we have, people say, oh, human nature's greedy, and oh, you have to pay, and I can't do it unless I'm paid, and there's no money in it. And then people wind up depressed, and they don't do anything except passively watch entertainment. So what excited me about the idea of doing rabbitholecentral.tv to come after my show is I wanted to be available for any, even abuse. Even abuse would be feedback. To say, I think your show, you know, Margaret's laughing there over the switcher, but see, I love that. You know, it's like feedback. And so you kind of know that a connection's being made, and either the person that says, you know, you're full of it and it's a crazy idea will convince you, you're going to give them the platform, or you can convince them. But in any case, for having been available for that feedback, whatever you're trying to create, whatever your message is going to be greater because of that feedback.
Yeah, and that thing you said about people being reward and punishment, that's a big paradigm shift. Why would anybody do anything if they weren't going to get something for it? That's like you could take that as a profit motive, or you could take it as an ethos that informs virtually all of our historically inherited institutions, and people, the masses of the people, are caught up in a situation of, I got to do what these people who represent these power structures that exist out of history tell me I have to do, or else I'm not going to be able to have any food to eat or anything. So it's a situation where people are not in any kind of a way liberated in terms of their own situation, and that may be the promise of the future that's emerging, and that's why so many people interested in trying to create a world where the human values that really matter, love and all these kind of things, are not a negotiated thing by everybody in a
Right.
business sense, and that's a
Right.
different kind of world
How
than
could-
what history has presented.
Right,
Yeah.
and after all, how could love be negotiated? Like, if the first commandment is to love God, how can you be commanded to love, and how could that be really love?
Well, they make
if
it a
you're,
deal.
If you're doing it,
You're going to make a deal. You're going to make a deal. I'm going to do it. If I give you enough coconuts, will you do what I say you should do? Or if you don't have the right to eat, or you're not going to let your children be able to eat, if you don't do what I tell you, then you see
Right.
it's a different kind of world than if
but
somebody's got
that's- yeah.
availability to them of what they need in order, or even want reasonably. And that may be the world that's emerging, a post-scarcity ontologic reality, which is a big transformation.
Well, you know, that's one of my favorite topics, because I think that the quintessential deal that was ever made in the awareness of our society, Judeo-Christian, and even Islamic, is the deal that Abraham made with God.
Yeah.
And that's something that this entertainment-oriented society doesn't like to consider that much.
No.
Because it's painful. It's a painful consideration.
What did Abraham say?
What did Abraham say? Oh, you don't know what Abraham... Okay, well, I should... Abraham was... I guess he was getting towards the end of his life. And Sarah, his first wife, had never conceived a child. And he had a child by another wife.
Hagar, I think.
Yeah, and there was a lot of problems with that because Sarah got jealous, I think, turned her out, and she wandered around on the desert. So his firstborn was actually from, you know, the other woman. What was her name?
Sarah, I think.
No,
was
not
it? No,
Sarah.
Sarah?
No,
not
Hagar.
Mm.
And so that's why the original gripe that the Muslims have is that they're descended from the true first son, because in these cultures the first son is supposed to have the ability and the charge, and some have said, I mean, Alan Steinfeld,
Yeah.
talking from Chinese medicine, says the greatest vitality that's passed on is passed on to the first child. So if the first child came from this woman, and if Abraham sacrificed his second child from Sarah, then they would say, well, we're the true descendants of Abraham because you sacrificed your son Isaac. So there's different interpretations. Obviously, most of the Jews today would claim that he didn't really sacrifice Isaac, that at the very last minute, the sword was taken out of his hand by an angel, so that means you're believing in the supernatural. Or he decided, he saw a ram and he switched it and he got the message from God, but that's still supernatural communication. He got the message from God that he should sacrifice the ram instead. This is so profound and deep, and I know when I was in India at the time of Eid, which is the time that the Muslims recognize this event, and they sacrifice a lamb, a goat, or something like that. And I was watching the most beautiful calico goat being looked at undoubtedly by his owner with such love. It was tremendous to see the love that this man had for this beautiful, beautiful goat. And you knew this was the time of Eid, and you knew what was going to be happening. And the poignancy of the event, I can't even begin to describe to you.
We should get that story across to the Roar people.
Well, it's so profound.
Animal rights.
And I would sometimes talk to the Muslim leaders. I can't remember what they call them, that would be sitting in these dargahs. And I had just read René Girard's Violence and the Sacred. And I said, the Western world does not understand the sacrifice of Abraham and Eid and what it's about. And he said he knew, and these were people who were kind of always checking me out, because I was always on shaky ground. You know, part of them was really intrigued because I was a Westerner, and there was a hope that I could be kind of a messenger to sort of bring back a feeling of peace, and that there shouldn't be this horrible division and horror, because we've definitely made the Muslim the bad guy. The Osama bin Laden cave and so on, and there's such...
It's the bête noire du jour, is the Muslims. It's shifted back and forth over time at the convenience of the power structures that exist.
Yeah, so, and I mean, people can claim that Abraham made his son the scapegoat, and you can't even consider what you know, it's just unthinkable. But the nature of my show, farther down the rabbit hole, I try to go into the unthinkable. And right now, Nico Haupt has been taking over my show while I was gone.
Yeah, he did a good job, yeah.
Thank you, Harold. He did a good job.
You were in San Francisco visiting your dad.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
and I
right.
think in very large part thanks to the energy you put into it, because you've always talked about scarcity being transcended and our technological precipice that we're on to destroy all of humanity. And Nico is his soul is crying out, please understand these weapons. But one of the most controversial aspects of 9/11 truth is a TV fakery. And the computer-generated images that we're seeing on TV, and the people that are calling it to the public's attention are people who have nothing to lose. They're not worried about losing their jobs, perhaps because they're already homeless or jobless. But they, at one time, were working on computer graphics, and they understand what was presented on mainstream. And because of this, the majority of people in 9/11 truth say, oh, people can't handle it. Just like they can't handle the sacrifice of Abraham, you know, they feel the public cannot handle what really happened on 9/11. This is the 9/11 truth, people have limitations of what they'll talk about. And so that's the heartbreak that exists. And just like that man who looked at his goat, there's many things that I and others who I've grown to respect have enormous heartbreak over.
Yeah. Well, if they're going to have a hard time handling that, they're going to have a very difficult. I remember, I think cast back, when Galileo presented to the world, or Copernicus, the idea that the Earth was not the center of the universe, which had been intrinsic to all the, you know, cosmology and the thinking and the means by which people got a sense of identity. Hieronymus Bosch came up with all those paintings that depicted such deep anxiety and angst and so forth that caused. And when you have a paradigm shift or a qualitative transformation in the situation from the means by which people get an identity, it really is upsetting. Partly because you had all these institutions that have formed within one context, and then the understanding brings a different context that is qualitatively different than what everybody had been getting their identity from. And so I would submit that you have a much even larger one, in a certain sense, if this idea that was put forth, as I would say, by Bucky Fuller, who was a comprehensive thinker, and there were others, there were many others, it's been put forth, you know, Murray Bookchin, a lot of other people, that we may...
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
If you want, sure, go ahead.
Just because I want to make sure people are understanding this point. In other words, it's not going to look like what we think, because it's if they said that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and Hieronymus Bosch was
a painter, yeah.
A painter was depicting the great angst
that created.
That created.
Yeah.
At that time, this was a very painful process.
Absolutely.
This was not just the church holding out. This was people in
general.
The church were in shock.
Yeah, the church. You have church and you have political institutions. You have all your institutions formulated within a certain context of understanding, and then those are torn asunder by a new reality that's emerging.
Yeah,
Alan talks about new realities.
Right,
and
I know,
so forth,
and you used to say it's not going to look like what we think, and I used to think, what does Harold mean by that? Because how can I even imagine what I can't even imagine?
Well, yeah, it's that, and you can go back through all of evolution and so forth to a series of singularities, things that appeared. We, the Homo sapien species, were contained 4 or 5 million years ago. We did not exist as a species. You have an evolutionary process. We were contained within what they called the Australopithecine, a line up the hominoid line, and then there became Homo habilis. And then about 200,000 years ago, humanity appeared with a new reflective consciousness and so forth. And we may actually be coming to the end of the situation that we've been in throughout 200,000 years of human experience due to our technological extension of consciousness and creating an environment different than what we emerged out of. So it's like leaving the womb. And a larger thing even than the geocentric, heliocentric transformation that occurred is, from my way of thinking, is the fact that, put forth by Fuller and others, that the idea of material scarcity, that there is not enough, that was the condition in which everything occurred. I think most of the time we were wandering around. 200,000 years ago we appeared out of Africa. and we were wandering around picking up carrion or doing whatever we could to eat. It was a very hard scrabble. It was very difficult. There obviously wasn't enough. And then we evolve and we evolve. We get to the point now with the technological success, we may have transcended the ironclad laws of scarcity itself, which is a qualitative transformation, that there is enough with the elegance of design and the technologically augmented capability of providing for humanity, all of humanity, rather than a favored few, which has been the case most of the political systems came up with, identifying themselves as the deserving few, I noticed, the emperors of Rome and so forth. But then we do that, and then that would also relate not only to the humanities lot, the 80% are not well served by the institutions we've inherited, and so it's a qualitative transformation that is the challenge that faces us now. And I'm upset because the idea that we may have actually created a qualitatively different situation of transcending scarcity is never mentioned. It would be the largest paradigm shift in the history of evolution of biological processes on this planet if that were the case. It's been advanced by some, modeling and so forth, and it's never bothered to be mentioned because it's assumed to be ipso facto absurd that there can be a situation where there is enough as an ontologic reality, and it's never mentioned. So we may be overlooking the major paradigm shift in the history of the evolution of consciousness, and it's bothersome because that may be the way that would prevent us from destroying the whole species, which on the negative side we now have the capability of doing with our weapon systems that have become so sophisticated. So that's a large paradigm shift. It would be nice if it were just sometimes mentioned by somebody rather than just assumed to be absurd.
I'm going to tell you what you've told me about that, is to be kind to yourself and gentle to yourself, because
to ourselves as a species,
to ourselves,
yeah, because
this,
the transformation,
this bothersomeness that you're talking about, or this being upset, there really is no one to be upset at or to be bothered at, because they are just as locked as we are, those few on the top.
Yeah.
It's the way the whole entire paradigm shifts.
Well,
and
yes, I would see that as a possibility, because we've had a dialectic. You can go to Marx, or you can go to any understandings of political economy or evolution of sociological, or, you know, and it's always been a question of you get one group who's in control, and they convince everyone that in order for us to have the grain, we got to go rob it from the other people for our tribe to be better, and so forth, and all these differentiations. And all of our institutions are built into authoritarian structures where they corral the masses to do what a few people understand is necessary for them to benefit. And they call that the advancement of civilization and so forth. So you have all of those, and it's always within a context where there's not nearly enough, never can be enough, and then they get assumptions of human nature, as you said, that human nature, it's absurd to even think about it, because human nature, everybody can understand, is just inherently greedy and will have to get for theirs. And you have to protect your kids against women figuring which child they're going to let starve to death. And when we know there's enough, it's a different thing if there is enough. It creates a different context within in which institutions can be formulated, and it's never mentioned. That it is never mentioned as a possibility is upsetting to me, whereas I think it should be 10 feet high on every think tank in the world. We have possibly, how do we model it? Is it possible that we've transcended scarcity, and that's a reality in which our institutions could be reformulated, and the technology is making it possible for us to go down that pathway, which may be the thing that'll lead us to coming into the contact with consciousness at a fulfilled, transcendent level to what we've been throughout all of human experience. It's a little hard for people to get a hold of that. Okay.
What I was trying to say was that John Cheshire Sr. called to my attention there is a scientist in
Just push
England.
record, Maggie.
Oh, you want to hit record there? We've got 2 tapes running here. There's a scientist in England, Aspton, who got a PhD from Cambridge, and he has a completely different paradigm that's ether-based. And as little as I know about science, I told John Cheshire Sr., who went to school with George Bush at Yale, that an ether-based understanding was ridiculed. So I was really surprised, and John said, yeah, you know, that's true. This was ridiculed. But quantum mechanics and Einstein could not explain the unified field. Einstein went to his death not able to unify the field.
He never was able to deal with gravity.
What I'm hoping is that you will have as a guest on your show John Cheshire Jr. And John Cheshire Jr. was a producer of a video documentary called Mystery of the Sphinx, which got an Emmy for research in 1993.
Okay.
And it talks about redating the Sphinx with water erosion.
Yeah.
And thus coming up with a very different outlook about our history.
About Egyptology,
About
yeah.
Egyptology,
Yeah,
and then along with it, many other things will shift. So I can, it's a wonderful show you've got, Harold, and you can invite so many exciting guests on that
Yeah.
can give people
Yeah,
pause to reflect.
I saw that that program you did with John Cheshire. It was very good because you went into, you know, the strong force, weak force, and then gravity and electric over at MNN.
Yes, that
so
was, I feel good about that, huh, Maggie?
you feel good about that? Well,
Yeah.
we'll see.
I mean,
Oh, well, that
But we
glitch,
no
we'll have to
glitch on
see what
here.
we got. Okay,
No
now
glitch
what
on
we've got
here.
to do is strike the set.
okay.
Maybe over at MNN.
Yes, that
so
was, I feel good about that, huh, Maggie?
you feel good about that? Well,
Yeah.
we'll see.
I mean,
Oh, well, that
Well,
glitch,
no
we'll have to
glitch on
see what
here.
we got. Okay,
No
now
glitch
what
on
we've got
here.
to do is strike the set.
okay.
Maybe